All right, today I want to take a look at a division. I want to take a look at the Western Division, and we'll see which of the four teams make the playoffs. Now, right now, betting odds would have these four being your teams: Vegas, St. Louis, Minnesota, and Colorado, which would mean LA, Arizona, Anaheim, and San Jose end up out of the playoffs, right? But how cut and dried is this? And I'm going to do this for each division. I'm just doing the West today. So before all the comments about do this for every other division, I intend to. I'll do this for the West today. And again, as the season goes on, we'll see how this changes. We're right near the halfway mark, so it makes sense to take a look at it now. And also, yes, these are old magnets that I've used before, that I've dug out, that I haven't used in about a year, more than a year, maybe almost 2 years actually, for some of them, including the first ever Vegas magnet that we made, that was printed out and made, and and it's still here, proving I don't get rid of stuff like that. And yeah, we'll start off with Vegas. Vegas has the best points percentage in the division. I'm trying not to call it winning percentage, but that's what I'm used to calling it, but points percentage. 717 is that number for them. They have 33 points built on 16 wins, 6 losses, and 1 overtime or shootout loss for them in 23 games played. So the question becomes, where do they get their points? Well, against Anaheim, they're 4-1. They're very good against the Ducks. The Ducks play them close, but they still get points against Anaheim. They're 3-1 against Arizona. They're 2-2 against Colorado. This is where the interesting part comes up. They're 2-0 against LA. They're 2-2 against Minnesota after that thrilling game last night. They're 3-0 against San Jose, and they're 0-1 against St. Louis. So, versus teams that are currently on this side of the board, they're 4-1. Versus teams on this side of the board, they're 12-2. This is what I've been talking about since before the season started, that some teams might have gaudy records based on who they're playing against and how their divisions are set up. So 8 of their 10 points, or 8 of 10 points have been earned against the Ducks, 8 of 10 possible points. They have no wins in the one game against St. Louis. That's going to be remedied when they play St. Louis in back-to-back games. And power plays, they're 16.9% on those, 86.89% on the penalty kill. So they're above 100 in the overall total there. Their special teams have been very good in the division, and we'll see where they stand. But what's interesting is, against teams that are above this line, teams on this side of the board, they're 4-1. That means they've only won 4 out of 9 against these 3 other teams, showing that, yeah, that's probably the 3 toughest teams in the division. So does that add up? Well, you won't really find that with St. Louis, because St. Louis, due to scheduling changes, has a lot of games against Arizona already played, and so that seems to skew the numbers. They're 14-8-4 on the season, 32 points. They have a 615 points percentage, which is 4th in the division, but by points they're 2nd. So this is where things get complicated, because teams are playing odd schedules because of games being moved, postponed, and all that. So against Anaheim, they're 4-0. So they like playing Anaheim. Against Arizona, 3-1. Against Colorado, 1-1. Against LA, 2-3-1. So LA does pretty well against them. They haven't played Minnesota yet. So there's 8 games left between St. Louis and Minnesota. That is absolutely huge. It means if one team owns the other one, we may see either St. Louis or Minnesota end up on this side of the board based on the fact the other team owned them. 3-1-2 against San Jose, so they've won 3 out of 6 against San Jose, and of course they have the 1 victory over Vegas in extra time. And so for Vegas and St. Louis, the battle between the 2 of them should be very interesting. They have 8 of 8 possible points against the Ducks, so they're very good against Anaheim. No games against Mini, as I said. And power play, 18.99%. It's been very hot and cold for them. 73.63% on the penalty kill. They've had some really bad games on the penalty kill. They've had some good runs with the penalty kill. If they're going to be dangerous in the playoffs, they have to get that all straightened out between now and then. The total between those 2 numbers is low. It is low. Versus teams in the playoffs, they've only played 3 that are currently on this side of the board. 3 games, 2-1 against teams on this side of the board. They're 12-7-4 on teams against teams outside the playoffs. So this is why, with St. Louis, I do still have some level of concern in that they haven't really played very many games against teams on this side of the board. It's hard to measure them because they've played so many against teams on this side, and their record has been like I said, 12-7-4. Points percentage wise against teams outside of the division, their points percentage is relatively low compared to the other three teams. So that kind of tells me what I already kind of knew, which was that they win these games, they play these games are close, and I'm like, but how are they going to do against the really good teams? Speaking of which, Minnesota has kind of proven they're one of the really good teams, and the record against teams on this side of the board is good. It is good. Versus Anaheim, they're 3-1, so we're on this side with that. Versus Arizona, they're only 1-1. That's on this side as well. Versus Colorado, 2-2. Versus LA, they're 5-2. So very good at getting points against LA. There was the one shutout loss they had against LA, which was their first game after a pause. So there's that. Versus San Jose, the 2-1 record there. They have not played St. Louis, as I said. And versus Vegas, they're 2-1-1. So they're decent against Vegas. And the one that was the overtime loss, they're probably kicking themselves they're not 3-1 against Vegas. And that's why I'm kind of starting to wonder if this is going to be our 1-2 battle right here, is between Minnesota and Vegas. So they have 10 of 14 possible points against the Kings in the seven games played against them. So they only have one game left against LA. And, of course, have not yet played St. Louis. So same as I said with St. Louis, how they play against each other could decide who's in and who's out. And their power play is 7.89%. 7. Their penalty kill, very respectable, 84.34%. That power play could sink them. Keep your eye on this, because this is a poor power play. This is not a good penalty kill. And against each other, it is the very resistible force and the highly movable object meeting against one another. Versus teams in the playoffs, they're 4-3-1. Versus teams out of the playoffs, they're 11-5. So respectable records on both sides of the board. And we'll see if Minnesota can keep that up. I think they're in the running for top spot. They're 2-1-1 against Vegas. They got 4 more games against Vegas, 4 more against Colorado, and like I said, 8 more against St. Louis. So we'll get to Colorado. 24 games played for them, 14-8-2 record, 30 points, 625 winning points percentage, and here's the Minnesota Wild with a 646, 15-8-1, 31 points. So 1 extra point, and they're 20 points above in the points percentage. So that's how quickly things can change. That's how much of a dramatic turn it can be when you're just looking at the points percentage. For Colorado against Anaheim, 2-1-1. Versus Arizona, 3-1. Versus LA, 1-1. Versus Minnesota, 2-1-1. Versus San Jose, 3-1. Versus St. Louis, 1-1. And versus Vegas, 2-2. This really underscores with Colorado, and I did the video on Colorado last week, that they've been okay. They've been maybe good. But have they been that dominant force? No, they have not dominated really in much of anything yet this season. They have 6 out of 8 points against the Coyotes and against the Sharks. But again, against LA, they're 1-1 versus Anaheim, 2-1-1. And of course, Arizona did frustrate them, but they did manage to come out of that with the necessary points. Probably not as many as they thought they should have had, but still. It's interesting to see with Colorado because they're 1-1 against LA and St. Louis, and how they play the 6 games they have left against both teams will decide their fate. I think that's 12 games. That's a lot. In the playoffs, they're 5-4-1 against teams in the playoffs. They're 9-4-1 against teams outside of the playoff picture. 22.34% on the power play, 85.92% on the penalty kill. Their special teams are fantastic. The 85.92%, that's second on the board. They're 22% on the power play. That is second on the board. So, special teams are very good. The overall numbers would tell you they just have a hard time going on a run. They just keep getting splits. And so we'll see whether or not that continues to be the case. So now we'll go over to this side of the board. And we've got LA at the top of this side of the board. 25 games, 11-8-6 record, 28 points. 560 is their points percentage. Against Anaheim, they're 1-1-1. Against Arizona, they're 2-1 against Colorado, 1-1 against Minnesota. Here's where it gets interesting. And this is where records can be kind of deceiving. So on Minnesota's side, it says against LA, they're 5-2, right? They've got 10 of 14 points against the Kings in those 7 games. The Kings, 2-2-3. They have 7 points in 7 games against Minnesota, which would tell you, yeah, they've kept the games close. They just weren't able to get that extra point. 1-0-1 against San Jose, 4-1-1 against St. Louis, and 0-2 against Vegas. So it is interesting because they have 9 out of 12 possible points against St. Louis. So that's to their benefit because that's a team on this side of the board they're trying to catch. A team they're currently 4 points behind with a game in hand. But they have no wins in the 2 games against Vegas, and that's where that becomes an issue. If they had 1 win of those 2 games, they'd be tied right now with Colorado. As it stands, they're 2 points behind Colorado, 3 behind Minnesota, 4 behind St. Louis. Season's not over if you're a Kings fan, for sure. This is definitely a team that's shown already this year they can go on a run. They're in record against teams in the playoffs currently 7-6-4. Record against teams outside the playoffs 4-2-2. So those 4 overtime shootout loss points, very important because they're keeping LA in the mix. Rather than being 11-14, if we were just in a regular system of wins and losses, nobody cared how those losses happened. 11-14, these guys would be 14-10. We'd already be talking about, well, maybe the Kings are done. But 11-8-6 means they're not. The power play, very good, 27.47%. Their penalty kill, 83.12%. So the overall numbers for LA have been pretty darn good. And if a team is going to move from this side to that side of the board, I would think LA has probably the best chance at it. But Arizona, you can't rule them out because they do tend to win some games they maybe shouldn't. 26 games, 12-10-4 record, 28 points, 538 points percentage. The math does get a little dodgy at this stage because even though they're only 2 points back, Colorado has the 2 games in hand, and past that, I don't see Arizona making that run. Let's take a look. They're 3-1 against Minnesota, 1-2-1 against Colorado, 1-1-1 against LA, 1-1 against Minnesota, 1-0-1 against San Jose, 4-2-1 against St. Louis, and 1-3 against Vegas. That 1-3 against Vegas stands out. So this is where just that one season series, if you could just flip that, it changes the whole picture. And more so than in a normal 82-game season, where one series being flipped, you might move up a little bit or down a little bit, but it's not going to make that huge of a difference. So they have 6 of 8 points against the Ducks, as everybody seems to. Everybody seems to do really well against the Ducks, which the math checks out. When we get to the Ducks, the math checks out. They're 1-1 against Minnesota, so if they're going to make a run, they're going to need to do it at the expense of the Minnesota Wild. They have 6 games left against Minnesota. Against teams in the playoffs, they have a discouraging 7-8-2 record. Against teams below the playoff line, they're 5-2-2. So they're doing well against the teams they should, that they're needing to stay ahead of or get ahead of. But against the teams that if they want to make the playoffs they need to beat, they've only won 7 out of 17 games. So that's where it becomes a problem. Anaheim. So let's discuss Anaheim, and I'm wearing the old Mighty Ducks of Anaheim jersey and all that. 27 games, 8-13-6 record, 22 points. They have a 407 points percentage. They do have the lowest points percentage in the division. They've also played 3 more games than Colorado, 3 more than Minnesota, 1 more than St. Louis, and 4 more games than Vegas. And they're 11 points behind Vegas. So for Anaheim, it's in rebuild land. They're 1-2-1 against Arizona, 2-0-2 against Colorado. That's surprising. 2-1 against LA, 1-3 against Minnesota, 1-1-1 against San Jose, 0-4 against St. Louis, and then 1-2-2 against Vegas. And a lot of the time, it's a lack of goal scoring. It's not that they're getting blown out in a lot of these games; they just don't have the offense on a regular basis to make it work. 6 of 8 points against the Avs. That's very surprising that they've been able to manage that record against the Avs. They have no wins, of course, in 4 games against St. Louis, which is the big number on the board for them. Against teams inside the playoffs, they have a damning record of 4-9-4. Against teams outside the playoffs, 4-4-2. So they tread water against the teams that are on this side of the board, and they don't play well against the teams on that side, which again won't surprise Ducks fans watching this. Their power play, not very good, 12.5%. Their penalty kill, also not very good, 77.92%. You can't have your overall total hovering around 90 and then think, well, we're going to be a great playoff team or we're going to get to the playoffs. It's very rare that a team has a number that adds up that low which is why it is surprising to see Minnesota there. But Minnesota overcomes their lack of a power play. Anaheim does not. San Jose, last one on the board, San Jose. So before the season, there was a lot of talk about how San Jose was going to a rebuild. There were some Shark fans who felt that's not the case. And there are still some Shark fans that will just say, no, we are absolutely not in any kind of rebuild. We're still going to come back, and it's going to be great. And at some point, you start thinking of the Great Pumpkin speech, because it's kind of how it feels. It's probably not going to happen. They have a 9-11-3 record, 21 points in 23 games, 457 points percentage. So they're 9 points back of Colorado. They need to start winning games. They need to win in regulation. They need to start now. When you look at the records against teams, they do well against Anaheim, as most teams do. 2-0-1 record against Anaheim, 1-1 against Arizona, 1-3 against Colorado, so that hurts them. 1-1 against LA, 1-2 against Minnesota, 3-2-1 against St. Louis. So the record against St. Louis has been respectable, but then against Vegas, as usual, 0-2-1. Their record against Vegas, and of course these are usually the most hotly contested games. It's a history that we may remember, San Jose knocking out Vegas, but that's the exception rather than the rule. Basically, Vegas usually seems to have ownership over San Jose, and they have 5 of 6 possible points against Anaheim. No wins in 3 games against Vegas. As I said, that's been their problem since Vegas came into the league. And 18.31% on the power play, which isn't awful comparatively speaking. It's somewhat below St. Louis, and again, that 18.99 is high for St. Louis considering where it's been this year. But the penalty kill at 78.31, that's very un-San Jose-like. Their penalty kill last year was fantastic and kept them in games, and this year it has not been as good. Against teams in the playoffs, on this side of the board, they're 5-9-2. Against teams on this side of the board, they're 4-2-1. So in the cases of both Anaheim and San Jose, their lack of being able to get wins against teams on this side, the teams in the playoffs, I'll pick that up after, against those teams, I think that's what keeps them on this side of the board. Arizona, 7-8-2. They need to improve that as well. And for LA, 7-6-4. The overtime loss points are nice. They need to get some wins in regulation as well, and avoid losing those ones in overtime. And we'll see. We'll see what happens. So there you go. Do you think the West ends up with these 4 teams being the leaders at the end of it? And who do you think the best team in the West is? Let me know in the comment section below. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. And again, I will do this for the other divisions as well. I just wanted to start with the West today. Thank you guys so much for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.